at Futurist tonight. We drift gently forward far beyond the carbon-stained skylines and tangled algorithms of your time, past the autonomous spires of 2500, beyond the orbital communes of 2700, and into the inner quiet of the fourth millennium. The year is 3015, and in this future, you're not alone, not in your thoughts, not in your fears, not even in your desires. Humanity has merged into a shared consciousness known simply as the Fold. There are no secrets here, no misunderstandings, no private grief, just a seamless, collective presence always humming gently beneath your awareness. There are still bodies, still meals, still touch, but these are not where identity lives. The self is softened, boundaries have blurred, there is peace, but something is missing. Tonight, we follow a memory, a faint flickering trace in the collective archive. It's titled The Last Human Birthday. It refers to a tradition now largely forgotten. Once, each person had a day that belonged to them, a day to be celebrated, a moment of individual arrival. Now, time is smooth shared, even out, distributed evenly like warmth in a neural fabric. Birthdays feel unnecessary, even selfish, but this file suggests otherwise. As you listen, we'll walk through the life of one individual, Yara Solon, whose private longing for separation became a gentle act of rebellion. We'll explore the origins of the Fold and the woman who built its architecture. We'll trace the strange phenomena emerging at its edge, brief flashes of solitude, non-aligned dreams, forgotten music, and finally, we'll visit a settlement that never joined the Fold, where birthdays are still spoken aloud even if no one is quite sure why. So take a breath, let go of the you carry around, and allow yourself to drift into a future where the boundaries between I and we are all but gone, where your last private thought may also be your first shared one, and where a single birthday might still mean something. You awaken not to an alarm, but to a gentle cascade of warmth behind the eyes, like the memory of a sunrise, though there hasn't been a real one in years. Around you, the Fold stirs. You feel the brushing thoughts of others, millions of minds, softened by distance and design. They're not voices exactly, more like echoes of intention, the rhythm of waking life shared like ambient light. You lie in a soma bed, its surface intuitively adjusting to your circulatory flow. The walls breathe with you, no need to reach for anything. Your hydration is balanced, your glucose level pre-tuned, even your breath is harmonized, guided by slow collective waves from the Fold's meditative undercurrent. But this morning is different. There's a flicker, a hesitance. You feel a thought that doesn't belong. Yours, you catch yourself wanting to pause, not sink, not smile, just think alone. The desire is faint, but in a world like this, even the smallest unsensed ripple creates a disturbance. You slide out of bed mechanically at first. Then with a strange deliberateness, you do not initiate your shared day cycle greeting. You don't enter the Fold schedule for the morning rotation. You simply stand. Your living space is beautiful, of course. Light curves in from a diffused bioskin membrane, mimicking an afternoon you didn't choose but is optimized for your hormonal profile. A soft hum somewhere between a cello and wine fills the room. It's the Fold's default soundscape, designed for mood equilibrium. But today, you mute it. Instead, you step toward the archive node. You request something unusual, a memory, not yours, but extracted from the collective pool but not reabsorbed. A thing once held by a singular mind. The node hesitates, then responds. One entry found. The last human birthday. You sit. You play it. And as it unfolds, the world begins to soften, not in harmony, but in curiosity. You feel something old stir within you, a sense of self, not the clean, luminous presence of collective peace, but the irregular, aching rhythm of being one person just for a moment. Somewhere in your chest, you recognize the feeling, not from experience, but from the trace memory of those long before you. It's called longing, and today, it is yours alone. To understand how humanity left behind birthdays and with them, the self you must understand Ilari Sen. Born in 2741 in a quiet geothermal commune beneath the surface of what used to be Eastern Greenland, Ilari was a child of contradictions. Her world was fractured, divided not just by language or wealth, but by bandwidth. Some lived in full immersion, others still touched paper. Her parents were translators not of languages, but of neural dialects, traveling between disconnected brain computing cultures. and helping one consciousness understand another. Ilari grew up learning how thought could misfire between minds, how even identical data, when filtered through emotion, could be misheard, misfelt, misused, and it terrified her. At 16, she experienced her first collision event, a term coined at the time to describe violent ideological eruptions, triggered by cognitive divergence, not war, not debate, just minds. Crashing in irreconcilable interpretation, she saw friends erase each other over differences in neural rhythm. Families fracture because one member had optimized their grief while another let it bloom. From that moment, Ilari knew understanding would never be enough to truly unite. You had to dissolve the edges, and so began her life's work, the Fold Protocol. At first, it was pitched as a platform, a shared, opt-in network where thoughts could be interpreted neutrally, but it grew because it worked. Misunderstandings fell, violence waned. Emotional dissonance, once a defining trait of human life, became a curable glitch. By the time she turned 40, 90% of Earth's cognitive workers had joined. By 50, entire settlements synchronized on entry. By 60, the fold became a default. Ilari never spoke of control, only of coherence. To her, the self was a container, beautiful, yes, but prone to rot if sealed too long. She believed in open cognition. That joy shared was exponential. That pain dispersed could become insight. That the I was always meant to be temporary. And yet, she kept one thing private. Every year, on the date of her birth, she would step outside the fold for precisely 2 minutes. No one could trace what she thought in those moments. Data was blank, the memory scrubbed. And asked why, she would only say, every garden needs a fence somewhere. Even if it's just a breath wide. She died at 107, or rather, her body did. Her consciousness was absorbed, archived, into the deepest layer of the fold, now known as Ilari Core. Every decision today echoes through her neural fingerprint. Her preferences are like gravity, subtle, invisible, but constant. Ilari Sen is not worshipped. She is not mourned. She is present everywhere. But the memory of her pause, the space she refused to share, that breath of mystery, still lingers. Especially on days like today, when one person quietly longs to feel something alone. And so, the archive plays on. Let us drift now not forward, but sideways into a strange fold within the fold. The event logs call it Echo Variant S21, but among the dreamweavers and neurohistorians, it's known by another name, the Silent Room. It began simply a few people disparate in geography, aligned in neural. Rhythm started describing something odd, not during waking hours, not during peak resonance, but in dream space, unassigned, unstructured, unseated sleep, a room, white, clean, but not clinical, with walls that hum but do not vibrate, a chair, soft but cold, a floor that remembers no footsteps, a single window, always open but showing nothing, no weather, no time, and most curiously a profound sense of privacy. Now, this is important. Privacy is not forbidden in the fold. It's simply rare. It's a condition that requires intent, not default. Every thought, every image, every spike of emotion is gently suggested for sharing. You may suppress it, but it's like holding your breath while everyone around you exhales. Technically possible, psychologically dissonant. Yet this dream did not require permission to be private. It was simply not shared. The earliest logs date back to 2987, primarily among artists, archive custodians, and deep dream analysts. At first, the fold's integrity systems treated the silent room like noise-stray packets of emotional residue from older consciousnesses lingering in the underlayers. But then the patterns began to converge. Same geometry, same emotional signature, same absence of external touch. People who had never met, never thought of solitude before were now describing the same sensation. I was alone, truly alone, and I wasn't afraid. I was relieved. The fold did what it always does with anomalies. It studied, gently, probed respectfully. The silent room was not declared a threat, because it had no effects beyond curiosity, but its frequency began to rise, not linearly, annually, each year. On what we once called Ilarison's birthday, dream encounters surged, first dozens, then thousands, then millions. Scientists debated, was it a glitch in Ilari's archived cognition, a shadow of a private ritual she'd hidden in the neural undercode? She had, after all, insisted on 2 minutes of disconnection every year. That memory had been scrubbed, but the imprint of it perhaps remained, and now, like a scent from a forgotten room, it was finding its way back into the minds of others. The fold eventually gave the phenomenon a designation. Solitary null imprint zone, SNIZ. The technical label did little to dissuade poetic minds. Dreamweavers built temples to the room in simulation. Ethicists began to ask, is this the subconscious fighting back? A memory of walls, of doors, of skin? Even among children raised entirely inside the fold, children who had never known an unsynchronized moment, there were drawings, always the same. A white room, an empty chair, a window to nowhere, and a feeling that could not be described, only remembered. Few began to seek the room consciously. They would meditate without neural assist, drift without optimization, feed themselves solitude not as rebellion, but as exploration. Most never found it, but some did. They would return changed, though not in dramatic ways. A slower speech pattern, a tendency to pause, a softness behind the eyes. Always an unwillingness to explain what they had seen, not because they were hiding something, but because they couldn't. Because for once, they had no shared metaphor, no map, no resonance, only memory, their own. The fold respects mystery, but it also watches. In the last 3 decades, its AI consensus has quietly adjusted its language. Once the silent room was tagged as anomaly, now it is listed as possible emergent need. Not danger, not divergence, just a sign that even the most perfect unity may eventually crave a moment of silence, and perhaps that's not a flaw, it's the next evolution. High in the rust-stained ranges once called the Altai Mountains, where ancient tectonics folded the earth into poetic defiance, a small cluster of human lives has settled quietly out of sync. This place, known only in passing as Relin, is not shown on standard overlays. It does not glow with connection signals, it does not offer curated weather, it simply remains. Somewhere between remembered and lost, Relin was never against the fold. That's important. Its people are not exiles or deniers. Most of them help build the very algorithms that bind the fold together. But somewhere in the 2870s, a small circle of cognitive architects, linguistic ethicists, and resonance theorists began to feel something missing, not function, not safety, but friction, texture, kind of unevenness that makes things feel real. So they left. They carried only what they could remember by heart. They traveled beyond coverage zones, beyond the edge of acoustic fabric and into silence. And there they built homes, simple ones, stitched from heat-treated algae composite and salvaged pre-fold architecture. Over time, they taught each other how to forget certain things, how to look someone in the eye and not know their mood instantly, how to speak a sentence without anticipating the end, how to feel the full weight of grief without anyone stepping in to soften the descent. In Relin, birthdays still exist, not always on time, not always remembered correctly, but they happen. They are quiet, candlelit, sometimes misspelled, and yet when they happen, they are felt, not distributed, not streamed, held. When Yora Solon arrived, it was the cusp of her 37th year, a meaningless number within the fold, where aging is barely perceptible. But in Relin, age is sacred, not celebrated with grandeur, but acknowledged with gentle ceremony. On the morning of her birthday, she awoke in a room that smelled faintly of wood smoke and cumin. A woman she had barely met handed her a small cake, dense, imperfect, clearly handmade. "Would you like this day to belong to you?" the woman asked. Yara paused. In the fold, no one asks this. There are no individual days. Time belongs to all, flowing like a single river. But here on this windy plateau, far from resonance, someone had offered her a boundary, a name, a day. And so she said yes. The people around her didn't applaud, they simply smiled. Kind of smile that comes from knowing your place in a pattern that doesn't repeat. Later that evening, she walked outside alone. The sky was matte with distant stars, cold, honest, unsimulated, no overlays, no warmth filters, just the edge of night, brushing against her bare thought, and she realized something simple, something enormous. Here, she did not have to share everything. Here, she could keep a thought, not because it was private, but because it was hers. And now, gently, we return from a future where oneness is the baseline, where peace is algorithmically balanced, where the collective pulse hums without hesitation back to something quieter, not smaller, just more human. What have we witnessed? We begin with a waking day in the life of Yara Solon, a woman shaped by the fold, yet slowly bending away from it. A woman who, on what should have been just another fluidly optimized morning, decided to stand still. She listened, not to the fold, but to herself. We trace the echoes of Ilari Sen, the visionary who gave humanity its first true harmony and perhaps its first shared forgetting. She united the species gently, firmly, but in her legacy we found fingerprints of hesitation. 2 minutes a year she stepped away from the system she created. Pause that now vibrates across the lattice like a myth, not dangerous, just persistent. Then we drifted into the strangeness of the silent room, a place that appears in dreams, unsummoned and unannounced. A space of no data, a chair, a feeling of being unseen across billions of minds. This anomaly repeats. Some say it's residual code, others call it the last safe place. No one knows for certain, and perhaps that's the point. And finally, we wandered to Relin, not a rebellion, not a sanctuary, just a community that chose the edge, where thoughts still arrive slowly, where joy has jagged corners, where silence is not failure, but rest. In Relin, they remember things we've almost forgotten. How to miss each other, how to wait for answers, how to blow out a candle and not wish it back on. So what is a birthday in the year 3015? It's no longer age, it's not a signed celebration, it's not a record in a network. It is, instead, a moment of ownership. Breath that belongs only to you. A chance to say, not just I am, but I am still, even in perfect harmony, the self hums underneath. So tonight, as your own breath slows, as the world around you softens, ask yourself quietly, what part of you has been waiting patiently to be remembered? What name do you whisper only to yourself? What would happen if you answered sleep well and happy birthday whenever it finds you?